It's time to talk a little Jazz basketball. He's my co-host. He's the color analyst for Jazz Pre, Half, and Post. His visit on the show is brought to you by Spherion Staffing. You have better things to do than scramble to find your next great hire. Let Spherion Staffing do it for you. Visit them online, Spherion. That's Spherion.com/Utah. Spherion.com/Utah. He's the one and only Coach Tim LaComb. What's up, Tim?
Hello, sir. Hello, Ben.
You need a new nickname, barbecue or something. We need to give you a cool new nickname.
You know, what I do have a bone to pick, because your last segment you were talking about old people and grandparents, and you know, then I come on. So I don't know if you're trying to tell me that I'm...
Tim, listen, you're like 40 years younger than Al Pacino.
Yeah.
I don't think you fall into the category of who we're talking about.
We're not asking you to make big speeches or announcements anymore either.
Well, thank you for that.
Hey, Jazz added 2 new players before we talk about Darius Baisley and Kenneth Lofton, who just got signed. I do want to talk a little bit about what we saw Saturday night, which was not a great performance by any means against the Denver Nuggets. I'm not surprised by what we're seeing from Keontae George. It was pretty obvious, I think, in Summer League that he was going to have these types of performances this year. We didn't get to see Bryce Sensabaugh because he was still recovering from knee surgery. He has something. When you watch him, what do you see from Bryce Sensabaugh?
It's the thing that stands out, and it's been, since I started watching his tape and then did a couple stars, got to see him play with stars, and now with the Jazz. Doesn't matter what level he's playing at, he's a really confident scorer. And some guys just have the ability from anywhere on the floor to find a shot, and he's one of those guys. And so, I think that's a real gift. And, I think that's really, in my mind, it's probably really stood out about Bryce. He scores real easily.
How much can you learn about young players in 20 games in the NBA? How much can we really etch in stone about anybody?
Oh, you know that answer already. It's little to none. We just last trip out east when the Jazz played Orlando, and just doing the prep and kind of looking at Jalen Suggs, progression in the league. And if you, after 20 games or after 1 year, if you had to make a decision, you'd probably punt on it. And the truth of the matter is, it for every guy it's different, and I think it is really that's the sweet nectar, I guess, of development, is really being able to see it and understand it, and then be able to tap the resource for what you need.
You mentioned something with Sensabaugh that I think is really interesting. He can score from everywhere on a lot of different shots. He's got baseline floaters. He's got fadeaways over Aaron Gordon. We know he's a good spot-up shooter. You coached a lot of guys. There are like sweet spots for some players, and as long as they touch the ball there, they're fine. And anywhere else they have the ball, they look lost. He just looks really comfortable everywhere. As a coach, what type of an advantage is that?
It's exactly right. I think it's a huge advantage. And to your point, he's got all that game. He catches that ball, and really he sees nothing but potential, on an offensive possession. The other really cool thing about him, and this has not been anything yet because, he's just getting acclimated, but in college, a really good, guy that they played through, catching it in the mid-post. He's bigger usually than the guy guarding him. And he can, so he can be that kind of guy too, I think, in time. But I really like it. And the other thing, Ben, defense has been kind of the concern, and his ability laterally to stay in front of guys. But I'll tell you what, I love his effort. And, effort is more than half the battle of defense. I think you got to have some intellect, but also to be able to really give everything you have, even if it makes you look foolish from time to time. And I really like the way he's kind of selling out on the defensive side.
Who officially is your favorite to win the NBA title? Who do you think at this point is the leader in the clubhouse?
Denver. I think Denver. I just think they know how. They've been there and done that. This is a pretty good regular season after winning a title, that they've had losing some pieces, but we saw the other night, they're really starting to round into form. And, Jokic at the end of the day is the greatest player on the planet. But he's got such great running mates. I think that's the key, is that team is so unselfish and they're so committed to winning, and a coach who really is not content. He's a sharpen the saw guy. He's looking for more. So I think for all those reasons, they're going to be really tough to beat.
Yeah, I watch the rest of the NBA, and there's just not many guys, even LeBron can't do it like he used to, that can dominate the game physically. And, I think actually New Orleans is playing really well right now, and Zion still, when he's dialed in and healthy, he can dominate the game physically, which I think makes them a really interesting first-round matchup. And you might even get a strange, they play the Suns in the first round and the Nuggets in the second round, which is a tough route, but they could give both of those teams trouble. But, yeah, that's the problem with watching Jokic. There's nobody in the world who can match up with him. And it doesn't matter if you have a 7-footer like Walker Kessler or, Yusuf Nurkic. It just seems like nobody really has any answer for what he can do.
It's interesting, and this was on the pregame show the other night, to go to your point, Ben. So we see what he can do from just a physical standpoint, big, strong guy. But, to Jake's point, he's not cut. He's not a guy that you'd look at and say, man, that guy works out a lot. I'd say that guy likes horses and maybe drinks a little beer. But the beauty of Jokic is, housed in that is this unbelievable ability to just make the right play time after time. And really, if you were to look at his brain, I would imagine it's got a six-pack, because, that's where he is just crushing people. Honestly, he is just so much further ahead from an intellectual standpoint of the game, that it's, and that's where he just gets all that stuff done.
Ben, we had this discussion on the the pregame show. Did you see those recent photos of Patrick Mahomes celebrating at the beach?
Yes.
He's the best football player on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Dad bod.
Absolute dad bod.
Absolute dad.
Yeah.
Dad bod. Look at Jokic. Best basketball player on the planet?
Dad bod.
Dad bod. It gives hope for fat guys like me.
Superpowers.
It's amazing. The power of
You're
the dad bod.
You're wasting your time at the gym, Ben.
Yeah.
You're wasting your time at the gym.
I haven't stepped into the gym for so many years.
You just said it yourself. Nikola Jokic has opted for the Budweiser as opposed to the sit-up.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working just fine for him.
Coach, the Jazz do add two new players. Darius Bazley, longtime kind of 3-and-D guy in the NBA, actually kind of ironically drafted by the Jazz in 2019, but was a part of the Mike Conley trade. Kenneth Lofton Jr., who, if you came to Salt Lake to watch the Salt Lake Summer League, you probably saw Kenny Lofton playing with the Memphis Grizzlies, a very large person. What are you looking for the Jazz these last 18 games with some of these new faces? Tavion Kinsey also signed. Young players are obviously getting a big chance to play. What are you looking for these next 18 games?
Just continued development, improvement. I said this the other night, but that game against Denver was tough, and the Jazz really never in it. But I loved how they competed in the third quarter, and really the crux of that was that Keontae was so good. Had 16 points, finished with 29. But that third quarter and that rally and him doing that against the champs, Jokic didn't want to get back in that game and had to come back in. It just, that to me is worth the tail kicking, because, in life you take a lot of tough stuff early on and you just have to grin and bear it. But all that stuff you keep, you got a long memory, you keep it all there. And so these young guys are just going through such cool times right now. And so I'm excited about that. And then I'm excited about, like last year, the Jazz found Chris Dunn, and I've said this before, but I would put it up against anybody. I think Danny Ainge sees and understands and is connected enough that he just knows players, and he's got a unique knack to know kind of what works. I know a lot of people were, ripping on the Chris Dunn thing last year, and Chris has been great for the organization. Just as an aside, Baisley's from Brockton, Massachusetts, of all things. So, another guy from New England. That's where Chris Dunn was from. But, I mean, it was not uncommon to see Danny Ainge at AAU tournaments along the East Coast when I go out there all the time. His sons were playing, but he knows players. I'll just leave it at that.
How much are you looking forward to watching BYU compete in a Big 12 tournament?
I'm pumped. I'm really excited. I mean, they finished 5th in the league, which is just absolutely amazing. 8 spots higher than they were picks. It's just awesome. And I think it lines up well for them. I think they have probably Central Florida, first. And then I like them against Texas Tech. They had a 20-point lead or a big lead at halftime. It was 20. Ended up losing in the second half, but they're better now. I think they're a better team. And then, you can get through those, and you're just on house money. So congratulations, honestly, to BYU. I think it has been an incredible story. And then I'm also excited to watch the WCC tonight, semis tonight. The Mountain West Conference tournament starts, and obviously the Ags are looking to try to do a clean sweep. So it's just fun. And then as an aside, my buddy, so I got to tell you a fast story, but my buddy, Brooks Savage, he just got his first crack this year. Has been an assistant for Steve Forbes for years at a bunch of different places, most recently Wake Forest. Young guy that I got to know just out and about recruiting. And his team yesterday, they finished 17-11. They won the first game, quarterfinals, 7 beat 2. They played yesterday, and they were down 20 with 14 minutes to go. Brought that thing back, scored a layup at the buzzer to go overtime, and won in overtime. So they're playing tonight in the championship game of the SoCon against Samford and Ryland Jones. So I'm going to watch that one as well tonight. It's just basketball city.
Who in the Big 12 do you believe in the tournament? And I mean the NCAA tournament, not the Big 12 tournament. And who do you not believe in? Who's a pretender?
I believe in Houston. I think that they just have, they have kind of like what I see with Denver. They just have a real unselfish team, and they're tough. I believe in BYU. I think BYU is going to give people fits on the offensive side, and they're a really good defensive team. I do not believe in Iowa State. I think Iowa State's a fraud. I've watched them play 4 or 5 times, and I mean, you just can't have a team that can't score 60. There's too many teams out there. It's why BYU was able to kick their tail here, by double digits. So, not in love with Iowa State. Baylor with the right matchup, they could do some things, but I don't love their guards. So it's kind of just a quick surmise.
Utah State. What do you think? I guess sum up the job Danny Sprinkle has done, winning the league outright. For the first time there at Utah State without returning a point from last year. Now that we can look back on the regular season, I mean, sum up the job he's done.
It's incredible. I got to know Danny a couple of years ago and started to follow him, and I was always impressed with how polished his teams were, how disciplined, how unselfish, really played the right way. And when Utah State had a chance to hire him and hired him, and credit obviously goes to Jerry Bovee there for getting that job done. It was, in my mind, a great hire, but then, the work of putting everything together and to not return a point, he did have a couple guys in his pocket with Great Osabar and Darius Brown, who that guy's the conference player of the year in my mind, won so many big games for him. So he had those guys in his pocket, but for his ability to go out and assemble a really great staff and then obviously target guys that made sense and bring them in a short clock, to get them all on the same page, to fly through the regular season the way they have, it just speaks to his genius, and I hear there's a big movement afoot to get him more money. I would not be surprised if they could come up with enough, because I think Danny's a pretty simple dude. But obviously business always speaks. So I'm excited for him and them, and they got a lot of basketball yet to play.
I want to revisit one thing you said quickly. You said you believe in Houston. They have a chance to be the number 1 overall seed. Do you believe in them enough to win the NCAA tournament? I mean, are they that good? And what do you make of Kansas?
Kansas.
I'm just trying to get bracket information from you. I'm trying to get some tips.
I like it. Leaf Tuline's the guy to talk to on that. He'll chew your ear for 45 minutes. But I would say Kansas I'm out on. That doesn't look like any Kansas team I've ever seen. They just don't have that Kansas swagger. And then who'd you ask? Oh, Houston. I think Houston could win it all. Yeah, I do. There's something in the back of my mind just tickling that says Creighton, to not dismiss those boys for the national championship. Because they have you talk about being old, staying old. They've got a really old veteran group of dudes that know each other inside and out, and a wily veteran coach. So I don't know where they're going to be, but they're a team that can score a lot of points. So just keep that one in your quiver.
Coach, you were the best. Thank you as always for jumping on with us. I'll see you tomorrow night.
All right, guys. Thank you.
See you, Coach.
There you go, Coach Tim LaComb. His appearance brought to you by Spherion Staffing, Spherion.com/Utah.